Welcome to AminAcademy.com. In History of Muslim World, let us discuss about the Umayyad Caliphates Hishām, Walid-2, Yezid-3, Ibrahim, and Merwan-2. Hishām ibn al-Malik was the 10th caliph of the Umayyad dynasty, reigning from 724 to 743. Born in Damascus in 691, he died there on February 6, 743. Ruled during a time of relative calm, though he did lead military campaigns along the empire's borders. He sought to consolidate administrative control over the vast land he inherited and to draw the northern and southern Arab factions into his administration. He is credited with building several Umayyad qasr, including Qasr al-Hayr al-Gharbi, Qasr al-Hayr al-Sharqi, Khirbat al-Mafjar, and the mosque at Rufasa. His father was al-Malik, and he was named after his grandfather Hishām ibn Ismail al-Makhzumi. Now let us give some details about Hishām. After the death of Yazid, Hishām, another son of al-Malik, was installed in the caliphate. Like the second Umar, he was also of a pious and devout tone of mind and was averse to pomp and luxury. Hishām was specially well disposed towards the people of Yemen. This embittered the Quraysh against the caliph, and the Abbasids began to profit by this opportunity in order to bring about the ruin of the Umayyad dynasty. The fire of rebellion spread over the whole of Kufa and Iraq. Khorasan also was not free from dissensions. In India, the various territories which had acknowledged subjection to the caliph began to throw off their yoke of submission. In these attempts to cope with these disturbances, Hishām was handicapped in the another way. Throughout his reign, he had to wage almost ceaseless war against the Romans of the Eastern Empire. Arab historians say that in AD 732, Constantine, who afterwards became emperor of Constantinople, was taken prisoner by the Muslims, but this was followed by a reverse of the Islamic army. In the meantime, the Berbers of Africa were proving a serious source of trouble. Meanwhile, in Spain, Muslim governor Ambaza crossed the Pyrenees and successively occupied Carcassonne and Nimes. After Ambaza's death, the Muslims occupied the whole mountains region of Gascony. Thereafter, the Muslims occupied Bordeaux and extended their domination over the whole of southern France as far as the river Loire. But AD 732, there was a fierce battle near Poitiers where the Muslims suffered a serious setback. 2 years after, Uqba, son of Hajjaj, the new governor of Spain, penetrated once again within France and occupied as far as Burgundy. But there was again a setback to the onflowing tide of Muslims' advance. The Berbers of Africa rose in insurrection. There were domestic dissensions in Spain also, and as a result of these various disturbances, Muslim hopes were frustrated in Spain and France. In AD 743, Hishām lost his life after having reigned for over 22 years. Next, we talk about al-Walid ibn Yazid. Was a caliph of the Umayyad dynasty who reigned from 743 to 744, only 1 year. As a young man, he was of artistic temperament and acquired a good education. He was, however, totally unfit to rule and went off to live in the desert, where he could be free from the burdens of public affairs and the moral constraints of the Islamic religion. He was a musician and surrounded himself with the poets and opportunists. He fancied himself a great builder and wanted to eclipse the architectural achievements of his predecessors. He did in fact build the desert castle of Mushata. He was killed when rebellions broke out in Syria. The domination of the Umayyads was now nearing its end. And on the short reign of Walid, and Yazid witnessed progressive decay of the power and influence of their family. Next. Now we'll talk about Yazid III. Yazid III from 701 to 744 was the 12th caliphate of the Umayyad dynasty and ruled for a short time in 744. He was the son of al-Walid-1 and was the first caliph to have an Arab father and a non-Arab concubine. Here are some other facts about Yazid III. He was criticized by religious leaders of the time. He tried to emulate Umar bin Abdul Aziz by increasing references to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet in government statements. He wrote a letter to Harith bin Surayyi in Khorasan expressing his anger at the neglect of Allah's ordinance and unlawful shedding of blood. Next, Ibrahim at 745 AD. Yazid III named his brother Ibrahim and his successor. Yazid fell ill of a brain tumor and died on October 3 or 4 in 744. Ibrahim duly succeeded him. Ibrahim ruled for 2 months in 744, very less period, before he abdicated and went into hiding out of fear of his political opponent. Ibrahim was named heir apparent by his brother Yezid III. Merwan-2 decided to oppose Yazid III, and even though he later gave allegiance to Yazid on the early death of that caliph, Marwan continued his own ambitions. Ibrahim requested and was granted Marwan's assurance of personal safety. He traveled with Marwan to former Caliph Hisham's residence at Rusafa in Syria. Like most members of the Umayyad family, Ibrahim was executed by the Abbasids in 750. Next, Merwan-2. Here, about Ibrahim, we'll discuss a little more. After the death of Yazid III, he was succeeded by his brother Ibrahim I. But Ibrahim was not long permitted to reign in peace of safety. Muhammad, son of the Merwan I, assumed the title of Merwan II and placing himself at the head of a large army, invaded Syria, defeated Ibrahim's generals in battle, and proclaimed himself as caliph at Damascus. Ibrahim was compelled to acknowledge him as his master. Meanwhile, all over the Islamic empire, Abu Muslim was spreading the fire of dominant discontent against the hated members of the Umayyad family. He began him machinations in Khorasan. The Kharijis and the descendants of Ali were, as usual, fighting among themselves in Khorasan, but Muslims succeeded in winning over both the rival factions, and with their combination help, he instigated rebellions simultaneously in Syria, Palestine, and Iran. The deposed Caliph Ibrahim began to interview with Muslims in secret, but on receipt of this information, Merwan made a prisoner of Ibrahim. Meanwhile, Muslim had occupied Mer, capital of Khorasan, and had driven away Merwan's governor from the province. Thereupon, Merwan, embittered against his enemies, ordered that Ibrahim should be put to death. But this, instead of putting an end of his life troubles, only increased them further. Ibrahim's brother Abul Abbas vowed that he would take adequate vengeance for the murder of his brother. Now let us talk about end of Umayyad dynasty. Umayyad dynasty ended in 750 after the Abbasids defeated the Umayyads in the battle of the Great Zab River. The Umayyads' reign began to unravel due to overextensions of the empire. The empire was struggling to defend its frontiers, prevent insurrections, and maintain its finance. Some Muslims also thought the Umayyads' taxation and administrative practices were unjust. Abbasids, with the help of Persians, Iraqis, and Shiites, defeated the Umayyads at the Battle of Great Zab River. The last Umayyad caliph, Merwan-2, was killed in the battle. The Abbasids desecrated the tombs of the Umayyads in Syria, except for Umar II. Most of the remaining Umayyads were killed. Some survivors of the Umayyad dynasty established themselves in Cordoba, Spain, and continued to rule there until 11th century. This we'll discuss in later. This remnant of the Umayyad dynasty became center of science, medicine, philosophy, and invention during the Islamic Golden Age. It will be discussed in later. Now, further, the reason of Umayyad's dynasty end. Abul Abbas, brother of the deceased Ibrahim, called a vast assembly at Mer. Muslim addressed the gathering in a spirited harangue and urged them to espouse the cause of Abbas. The Kharijis, the descendants of Ali, and the inhabitants of the locality all agreed with one voice to acknowledge the supremacy of Abbas. And Abbas proclaimed himself as caliph openly before the whole vast gathering. Merwan was frightened at this news and fled to Haran. But his enemies set off in hot pursuit and drove him successively from Emesa to Damascus, from Damascus to Palestine, and from Palestine to Egypt. Here also they followed close in his tracks, and so despairing of other means of rescue, Merwan took refuge in the Christian church and was there killed by an assassin. This meant the final extinction of the Umayyads and the rise of the Abbasid dynasties in its place. It should be noted that the name of this dynasty was derived from Abbas, who was the uncle of the Holy Prophet. The Umayyads sought it their principal business to administer the affairs of state. They cared little for religion, and they had further become unpopular from another circumstances. After the pathetic death of Imam Hussein, public sympathy had been strongly roused on behalf of the descendants of the Holy Prophet's family. It was openly and loudly proclaimed that the Umayyads were their persecutors and assassins. And hence, as the Abbasids were the agnatic descendants and next heir of the Holy Prophet, they were universally acknowledged as the rightful claimants of the caliphate. During the reign of the Umayyads, the Muslim empire had spread as far as Afghanistan and Balochistan in the east. The northern part of Africa also had come entirely under the sway of the Muslims, and they had succeeded also in extending their power far within the interior of Europe. Spain was occupied during the reign of the first Walid, and the southern and central portion of France also were embraced within the ambit of the Muslim Empire. From Muawiyah to Merwan II, the Umayyads altogether reigned for a period of 90 years. After this, the dissensions broke out between the Abbasids and Umayyads, and in the end, the Abbasids triumphed while the descendants of Umayyads went to the war. During the reign of Abu Abbas, the first of the Abbasid dynasty, the men of the Umayyad family were put to death, almost to a man. There was only one survivor named Abdurrahman. He fled to Spain and set up a new empire at Cordova. He and his descendants reigned in Spain with uninterrupted sway from AD 750 to 1027 AD, very long period. So far we discussed about the final Umayyad caliphs and end of the Umayyad dynasty. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.